Dear chess friends, my name is Boris Avruk and I welcome you to my opening coverage of round 3 of Candidates tournament. Now, this is like, as of course everyone knows, this is like probably one of the most important tournaments in chess world, besides of course World Championship match, where all the players are trying to give all their best. I think in terms of openings, it's this is the stage where you implement all your ideas, all your secret ideas. I probably some of you know that I had a few years of experience working at this level. Now I work with Fabiano Caruana, so there is one player who is playing here, but he was not as strong back then, but 2009, 2010. But working with Kramnik, Gelfand, I know that maybe some tournaments you try to avoid playing your like very powerful novelties, but this is the stage where basically no shortcuts, you just give all the best. Because qualifying for World Championship match, it's another stage of your chess career. This is something special, even if you lose this match. So this is something special, and I believe like the players, they don't try to hide anything to keep it for other tournaments. This is the stage to play the best openings and the best chess, of course. Let's start with the game. So we had 4 games in this tournament, in this round, obviously. 4 draws. Probably like we can easily say that the previous round was much more fighting, but still there were some really fighting games, some interesting opening ideas, and let me present you with what happened in this round. First of all, I would like to start with the only game which started with move e4, the game between Fabiano Caruana, like from US, and Krzysztof Duda, for Polish Grandmaster, who qualified by winning World Cup. Now, the game featured Najdorf, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, so the initial position of Najdorf. Of course, we should expect some challenging line here, whether bishop g5 or bishop e3, so not surprising. Fabiano played in this position f3. So in many cases, like the position might also occur through the move for bishop e3, but the difference that bishop e3 allows knight g4, bishop g5, and that's a different theoretical line. So Fabiano started with f3 and e5, which is definitely top choice nowadays. I remember Kasparov times when he was preferring e6, and there were a lot of developments in these lines, but nowadays we have mainly e5 at the grandmaster level. e5, knight goes to b3, bishop e6, bishop e3, and now basically this is a very important crossroad where black makes a decision to continue normal development. It can be either bishop e7, or I noticed there are some games with knight e7 recently, also on the higher level, or there is this approach h5 that I personally like even more. I personally recommend this idea to my students. I think it gets like a little bit more like less theoretical, where you need like to know every move, and if you don't know, like you're losing right away with black. So this becomes a little bit more positional play, and not surprising that Duda decided to go with this line. Of course, like everyone knows, and well, Fabiano Caruana preparation in sharp lines, sometimes very deep, like very often very like deep preparation. So I mean, he decided to go with h5. The line, it's the main line here: queen d2, knight bd7, queenside castle. Now there is a crossroad here. Black has tried b5, black has tried rook c8. Every move featured in many theoretical games, but bishop e7 is the main move. now there are 2 directions. King b1 still statistically top choice. Now another line is knight d5, knight d5, e d5, bishop f5. So taking into account what happened in this game and how easily Polish Grandmaster solved his opening problems, maybe this is the direction which is more promising for white. I mean, so definitely, we'll see a lot of games in the nearest future. I'm pretty sure it's all the time. This position happens on different levels. So this is a crossroad where like 95 is possibility, and king b1 it's still statistically the main move. And usually it's kind of like well-known idea that once black plays b5, it's slightly weaken c6 square, and now it's time to strike with 95. Once again, if we see what happened in this game, I would anticipate maybe a move like a3, not Russian with 95 would be more popular like after this tournament, because it seems like black solved his opening problems quite easily in this game. So 95. Now I think it's very important that knight takes d5 in this position is not good as it was previously played, because after knight a5, knight is coming to c6. So as I mentioned, b5 is weakening c6 square. Therefore, it's well known that black responds with bishop d5 in this position, e d5, and now knight a5 is a positional threat. So here comes knight b6. Very, very thematic, very common pattern in this type of positions. Knight b6, the pawn is hanging. Fabiano went for bishop b6, queen b6, and knight a5, still coming to c6. And very important defensive resource for black in this position, rook c8. To be honest, I was even a little bit surprised to discover that this position featured in 370 games. It seems like we're already so much inside this theory, like inside this opening variation, move 16, but I mean, there are still 370 games here. So very well-known theoretical line. Now, Fabiano played knight c6. Another idea, maybe, for the future games, for those who are interested to play this line for white, maybe to play this position. To play this position, even though black seems like showing pretty good results after queen a7. There are like a lot of games here. The position to study. Fabiano went knight c6, and here we can see the point behind rook c8. Black is able to take on d5 and simplify this position, but what is the most important, get rid of knight c6 knight, which is very powerful, of course. Knight d5, here it's pretty forced. Knight takes e7, knight takes e7, queen d6, queen takes d6, rook takes d6, knight c6. Pawn a6 was hanging, of course, and knight c6, just defending the pawn. To be honest, I'm not sure exactly why Fabiano went for this variation. I think usually, like it's well known that Fabiano is very dangerous with white, always comes with ideas, with some maybe even new concepts in the openings. This line, after rook d2, that he played, because king e7 is coming, I checked the theory, and there are quite a few games here, but the results are in black's favor. It's like +2 for black, where black won 2 games, and there are like a lot of draws. Also, it's very important to mention that there have been a lot of correspondence games in this variation. So you can basically find, without too much effort, you can see the best play for both sides from correspondence games. Rook d2, black seems to me very comfortable here. I'm not sure what exactly was Fabiano's idea in this game. King e7, bishop d3, normal move, rook h d8. All this has been played already in a few games. Rook h d1, g6. Another good move, rook d6, I would say. g6 was played. c3. I checked, there have been some games with move a4. For instance, the game between, I think a stem game in this variation between Dominguez and Vishwanathan Anand, where like rook b8. And it was once again uneventful draw, in my opinion, like take, knight d4, b4. All moves are pretty good, but black is doing great. Black is doing great, so c3, knight a6 is just equalish position. It was very well played by both players, so it's equal. as a starting position. Now black after a4 there is even knight d4, maybe playing somewhat for win. So there is a game from 2019 between two players, Salih and Ayai. So it seems like maybe this is like more fighting, maybe black is playing for win, but regardless, black doesn't seem to have any problems here. So this is the move a4. Fabiano played c3. Duda responded with knight a5, and only now we have official novelty. I don't think, it doesn't seem to me that that was a preparation of Fabiano to play here rook e2 instead of previously played king c2. King c2 here we have a game, like one of the games that I would like. Actually, I think two games here, f5. There is one game from 2011 which went a4. So I guess that's the only idea for white to create some play, to fight for advantage, but it's pretty easy for black. Knight c4, the whole point behind knight a5, rook e2, e5 pawn, kind of like in hanging here after bishop c4, so protecting, king f6. So there is a game even that black won by played by grandmaster from Vietnam, Le Quang, against Jens in 2011. So black even prevailed in this position. And another game featured g3. Here we have knight c6. So some potential ideas, knight d4, knight b4, because there is an x-ray, right? King b1, rook d6, a4. Once again, black is very well prepared, just pin, capture, king c2, b4. Again, was pretty equalish position. So this is the correspondence game from 2012, Baumbar, Saito. Yes, so back to the game. Fabiano played rook e2, so novelty on move 24. But I don't think it was some kind of preparation. I think he already played on his own this position. King f6, very logical. Pawn is hanging on a5. Of course, instead of king f6, nobody would play rook c5, even though computer kind of likes this idea, rook c5, to play rook c5, followed by knight by knight c6. So kind of like keep rook on c5. Of course, b4 is not working because of rook c3, and so there is this tactical justification. The bishop is hanging here. Yeah, king f6. Yeah, and then h4 was played, knight b7, so the knight transfers to c5, which will be great square. Rook d2, knight c5, bishop moved to f1, take, king e6. And it seems to me that in this position it's even a little bit, it's still objectively balanced, but it's easier to play for black because it's much more clear how to advance the majority on the king side. So we have here 4 against 3. Meanwhile, for white needs to make some decisions, and Fabiano decided to go c4, allowing b4, and fantastic outpost for this knight on c5. When I saw this position, I thought black is slightly better, and only black can play for win. It's not the bishop on f1 is not amazing. Blocked by his own pawns, but it appears that there are. With accurate play, Fabiano was able to hold this position quite convincingly. I haven't noticed any significant improvements for Polish grandmaster, so it was a fair draw in my opinion, which is definitely a great achievement for Polish grandmaster. Not achievement, but it's easy game with black, like just playing kind of like mainstream line, and yeah, well, I think Fabiano should be not happy, was unable to pose any problems with white pieces. Should play better, I believe, if he wants to qualify for World Championship match. Now, let's get to 3 other games. All of them started with the move d4. Now, knight f6, c4, so let's start with Gruenfeld game. Dean Cleran against Richard Rapport. Was very interesting game. As you know, I'm an expert in Gruenfeld with 2 of my books published on Grandmaster Repertoire, Gruenfeld opening, Gruenfeld defense for black, And of course, also I played, that was my pet opening for many years against d4. So Dinkleren with white against Richard Rapport. Very, very important game for Dinkleren. He needs, if he wants to fight for World Championship match, he needs to win. And that was a great opportunity for him, which eventually he missed. So here we got to the main line of Gruenfeld, which was knight c3, bc4, bc3, bishop g7, set up bishop c4, c5, knight e2, knight c6, bishop e3, castle, castle. So the position which is probably the most popular variation in Gruenfeld. Statistically, I haven't checked, but I have the feeling that for sure this position has been played out of like all the lines, has been played a lot. Now, there are very interesting developments in this line in general. If you know, guys, this line was very popular during the Kasparov-Karpov clashes, like World Championship matches especially. So, and back then, Kasparov, I think always, like in every game, played bishop g4 and knight a5, so this line. And from what I remember, mostly it was, maybe once again in almost all the games, bishop f7, rook f7, fg4, rook f1, king f1, so there was a lot of theoretical discussion in this variation, which nowadays considered to be reliable for black. Already with computers it's much easier. I think what black players fears more in this variation, it's rather a very well-known exchange sacrifice, when after bishop d3, bishop e6, d5 is played, sacrifice in exchange, bishop a1, queen a1, and now there is a threat bishop h6, obviously, so f6 must played. And now this is a tabia position with a lot of games. I personally decided to give up on this line because I felt like, well, I don't want to play this, exchange up but defending. Dark squares potentially can become weak after break e5. But there are like a lot of concrete theory. Nowadays, I would say like somewhat a latest trend, maybe a relatively new idea, h4. Usually it was knight f4 in this position, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe even knight d4. So this kind of moves. Now there is interesting developments with h4, maybe even some ideas for white. That being said, in this position, what is good about this line for black, that black has a lot of choices. There are at least, in my opinion, 5-6 playable lines. I personally like the idea of playing bishop g4, f3, bishop d7. I always play this. This is my recommendation in the book. And I don't think there is any refutation. It's just a game. So that's the issue when you choose this line for white. You have to be ready for at least 4 or 5 main lines for black. Now, Richard opted for b6 move. That's also like very popular line. One of the main lines nowadays at the top level. Now, that being said, I mentioned it's a hard system to play for white, because you have to be prepared for many different responses from black. So for unexperienced players, I don't recommend the system, even though, like, of course, they see some like really nice games, top players, but top players can cover all these lines and have the ideas. On the other hand, from white perspective, there is a lot of room for playing the new ideas. There is a lot of room for improvements, novelties. So it's considered to be one of the major lines against Gruenfeld, and it's not surprising. Now b6, rook c1 played by Dinkleren. He rejected pawn sacrifice. It's a very well-known line, again, hundreds of games. So here black basically sacrificed pawn and playing for compensation. Queen c7. What kind of compensation black has here in this position? It's rather, we are talking about the pawn structure that we can see clearly after the trade on b6. So the main line, in my opinion, runs here knight d4, knight e5, knight b5, black has to go queen b8, bishop e2, bc5, bishop c5. And the point is that these pawns, pawns a2 and c3, promise black a long-term pressure on the queen side. So, and this is the compensation basically that we are talking about. Considered to be, as far as I know, considered to be good standings for black in this variation. Somewhat critical line, of course, like white goes for the pawn up, but black is doing well. And one of the examples that I would like to mention here, the game from Tata Steel Tournament 2021, where a Polish Grandmaster Duda played against Anish Giri. There was a6, knight a3, queen c7, attacking the bishop, bishop d4, rook d8, queen c1, and knight g4. Knight g4, bishop g4, bishop g4. So this variation. And guys, as you can see, once again, it's not that black regains the pawn. It's rather playing against this pawn structure in the long run. So now of course, additionally, we got a little bit problematic knight on a3. And easy play for black, rook c8, of course, with pressure. So it seems like black is doing pretty well. Not surprising. Dinkler and believe that rook c1 is the best choice in this position. More chances for advantage. Rook c1, very thematic move, leaving the rook from the diagonal, of course. Bishop b7. So that's a very, very complex thematic Gruenfeld position that it's, I think, like essential to study for those who wants to play Gruenfeld. I always start with this line, bishop c4, knight e2. It's must study for like to understand that you like these positions, that you understand these positions. So here there are a few moves. Dean Lorang opted for bishop b5. Very interesting, somewhat unusual, but actually we can easily understand this idea. Now, I would like to mention that in this position, as I always say, there is always a question what happens after d4, d5. And black has to be ready for this d4, d5, basically every move, so black has to know how to react. At the same time, white has to check this move d4, d5 at basically every moment. So in this specific position, black probably has this, like in my opinion, knight e5, bishop b3, and f5, undermining the center and taking advantage of the fact that there is knight g4, so f4 runs into knight g4, and everything is vulnerable here with e3, e4. So this is great, and I believe because of that, like strong players are not really playing d5. Now, I wanted to mention interesting, I found the game where Dean Liren played with black, this position in 2020. I think it was a blitz game, in my opinion, against Boris Gelfand. That was an interesting game. Queen d2, rook c8, rook fd1, e6. Very thematic idea to place the pawn on e6. And in some way, this move neutralizes the idea d4, d5. Now we just can take, and it's much easier. Bishop g5, queen d7, h4. So that's interesting, like how more and more games features this idea h4, h5 for white. You can see this quite a lot recently. Now, it was pretty natural play here, knight a5, bishop d3, capture on d4, cd4, Dean Kluren captured rook c1, rook c1, rook c8, rook c8, queen c8, h5, and I think white got a little bit of pressure, so it still ended in a draw, but definitely this play can be improved easily for black, so definitely both players were aware of this game. Now, Dean Kluren went for bishop b5. The idea of this move can be seen from the following line. So what happens if we just play a6? This probably very serious inaccuracy. After bishop c6, d5 comes with the tempo, bishop b7, c4. So that's what white wants to get. Additionally, in this position, the problem is pawn on b6, so potentially target for the attack, e6, queen d2. So this is an advantage. There are like two games, and it appears that bishop, light square bishop, is not so good. It's restricted by white pawn structure with the pawn on d5, and that's the idea behind this line. So of course black shouldn't play this. Instead, rook c8. Rook c8 is a good move. Queen d2. Queen d2 played in the game. I checked, as I mentioned, I'm always checking d5, what's going on with d5. So this idea can be delivered now with tempo. Bishop c6, and I thought, well, bishop c6, d5, followed by c4. Looks like white is better here. Like, not so much difference with the previous line. Of course, maybe a little bit better version for black, because not committed for a6. But here, it's been proven in a few correspondence games that black can do rook c6, put the rook on d6, and c4 meet with e6. And it appears that next move e5 is coming, so here it was like queen a4, e5, and now what is happening here, it's also very important rule that the most dangerous for black pawn structure will be cd5, but in this specific situation f5 comes very, very powerful, and black century is very, white century is very vulnerable here. Black is taken over according to the engine. Meanwhile, e5, the pawn structure is not so dangerous, and so there is one of the correspondence game which featured like rook d7, tactically protecting pawn on a7. So there is a bishop d5, I guess. Bishop g5, queen c8, just some normal play, but I always felt like e5, I would always accept the e5 pawn structure. It's not a big deal, and there was a draw in one of the correspondence games. Now, queen d2 was played, cd4, cd4, and queen d6. Now, what is interesting, once again, this position also happened in the games of Dinkleren, so where he preferred e6, as well as probably the player who plays Gruenfeld at the highest level consistently, Maxime Vacher-Lagrave, MVL. So they both opted for this move. Without any doubts, both players were ready for this. And I'm very curious what is prepared for white. It should be a new idea, because after rook fd1, knight a5, now played by Dinkleren, Maxime opted for queen d6 against Anish Giri in Serbia 2022, so a fresh game. And then once again h4. And Anish had, well, actually not Anish Giri, I'm sorry, it was Yu Yangui. So another Chinese super grandmaster, so like just shows once again how Dinkleren was familiar with this line. I'm pretty sure h4, and there was a pressure. White got some pressure. Meanwhile, after knight a5, the score is in favor of black, +2 for black in this position. Now, one game though featured rook c8, queen c8, bishop g5, and I think Dinkleren could have played more accurately, but he went for queen c7, and after d5, e5, e5, queen c5, queen d3, d5 pawn was quite dangerous. Eventually, I think Dinkleren won this game, but it was a blitz game. Even blitz game is very important from theoretical point of view. It's remarkable what is happening nowadays. So that was some pressure here. Now, instead, it seems to me that a6, very precise. All this has been played in correspondence game, and after bishop d3, again, we have queen d7, Anish Giri against Jan Nepomniachtchi, another like Gruenfeld player, so Maxime and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Rook b1 seems like white is a little bit better here, but knight c6 is very powerful. So that was played in correspondence game 2020, bishop b1, queen d7, and it seems like black is totally fine here. Black is totally fine. Once again, this idea, complicated game, but objective evaluation. So even this is still very, very playable, but objectively, black is fine. Let's get to the game. Queen d6 was played in this position. Very, very common square for the queen. It's like in this pawn structure, queen d6. So usually black is not worried about e5 because d5 square will be weak. So in some positions there could be just a preparation for rook d8. There could be queen b4, queen a3 in some positions. So it's interesting move. Rook fd1 was played, and Rapport, Richard Rapport played queen b4 in this position. And not sure about this novelty. There have been other moves played. For instance, I saw Rook FD8, so there is a game between Russian Grandmaster Sanant Sugirov against Michuk. I mean, seems like a blitz game. D5, knight e5, knight d4. White is better. D5, it's a small improvement. Now, I also noticed there is well, e6 potentially transposed to what we discussed before. It's probably slightly better for white. And finally, I'm very curious about a6. I mean, a6 always in there, and it seems like bishop c6 should be played, and then bishop c6. And here there is a game, correspondence game 2020, so that gives me a lot of confidence in this a6 move. Pawn is hanging, f3 was played. Now, basically, d5, bishop a4, so the bishop comes on a4 with tempo. And also, after f3, there was bishop a4, rook e1, bishop b5, d5, capture on e2, and b5, and black was doing perfectly fine in this position. Absolutely no problems. So, interesting what was prepared after a6. Instead, queen b4 was played. Usually, endgames are very good in this pawn structure. Not surprising. Duda prefers to avoid this endgame. e6, as we know, thematic move. So, makes d5 kind of like a little bit more problematic. In general, white always wants to play d5 with a pawn on e7. That creates potential weakness. So now e6 is very natural. h4. h4. As I mentioned before, nowadays this is typical. So queen b4 was a specific novelty in this position, but then we actually transposed, after rook fd8, we actually transposed to the game Giri against Nepomniachtchi from 2020. Once again, my suspicion it's either correspondence or blitz. Or rapid or blitz game. It shows chess 24, so there is no way for me to know. It's probably one of the Magnus tournaments. Now, a3 was played in this game by Anish. Queen e7, bishop g5. It was an interesting fight. Bishop f6, queen a3, but Jan equalized convincingly after h6. Bishop takes h6, knight d4. The whole point of this h6 idea, knight d4, works tactically, and it simplifies to very, very equal position. Now, absolutely strong novelty here, bishop g5 from Duda. Very annoying move. In some sense, classical idea in these positions. Now, how to deal with this attack? Obviously, white is taking advantage that f6. Maybe, by the way, it's one of the best moves here, but blocks the bishop. Then white can simply continue a3, queen e7, bishop e3, and enjoy pleasant advantage. So black now should strike with a 5 at some point, but it's not very easy, obviously. Now rook d6 would be a nice move if it would work. Now it blocks the queen retreat path to e7, d6, and after a3, queen b2, rook b1, I think it's trapped. So white is losing here. Now, and rook d7 runs into d5 and losing material. Well, it's actually, I think it's not exactly the material, but white gets everything. Now, there is knight e5 move with tempo, but rook c8, bishop c8, queen c3. Yeah, what to do with this rook, and d pawn becomes super powerful, so that's also winning position according to what I checked. So I guess a very good practical decision, knight d4 from Richard. Exchange sacrifice, bishop d8, rook d8, h5, to follow up with the h4 idea. Also, it seems like bishop a6 was another good move, and h5, bishop e5 was played. So I think it's very well played by Duda here. a4, king g7, king f1. So objectively, he got clear advantage here. There is not enough compensation, even though black has bishop pair and one pawn. But the problem is everything is pinned, right? There is no way to untangle here. King f1, terrific move, preventing knight e2 check. And guys, I personally had no time to check any recaps. Like, of course, you can find a lot of YouTube channel and those like officially commenting on this game, but that was the opportunity, huge chance for Dinkleren that he missed to play queen d8. That was winning with two important lines. One is queen e4, which of course required calculation. It's also not easy, looks a bit dangerous, but the king is running away. King is running away, and there is a queen d4. So it's just one of the critical variations in my opinion. And knight c1, I would assume that probably he missed this move. Fantastic intermediate move, which creates the threat h6 followed by rook d8. And then we take the knight. Also e5 is hanging, obviously bishop on e5 is hanging. So after knight b3, h6, king g8, rook d8, right? So that's the idea. So queen d8, great chance for Dinkleren to win this game, get back into being a contender for the first place. Unfortunately, didn't really work for him. So very interesting game from a theoretical point of view, in my opinion. Important novelty, bishop g5. Actually, I would even say this game featured two novelties. Now we are going back to two other games that featured e6. First, we'll start with not so exciting game, I would say. Teimur Radjabov against Jan Nepomniachtchi. Knight f3, d5, g3. So here we got a Catalan position. Jan deviated from the line that he played during World Championship match against Magnus. He usually played bishop e7 and the very main line of Catalan. This time he prepared dc4, bishop g2, c5. So this line in very good shape recently. Not surprising, and it's kind of like straightforward line. In my opinion, it's a better fit for Jan than playing like positional bishop e7. So it's kind of like a very clever choice. Castle knight c6. So this is the main crossroad for white. I personally, in my books, as a Catalan expert, I recommend queen a4. I think it's more chances for advantage. There are some other moves such as knight a5 or knight a3 in this position. So those like a little bit less explored. Of course, queen a4 is like well-known top choice. And dc5. dc5 going for the endgame. But of course, Jan was very well prepared. Queen d1, rook d1, bishop c5. Knight bd2, it's the main line. White regains the pawn, of course. If black protects, knight e5 also can come. So that's no questions about this. c3, well-known idea. If we give up the pawn, at least we damage white pawn structure a little bit. Now, in general, I always felt like must play because castle knight c4, although recently, so castle knight c4 considered to be kind of like classical Catalan advantage where white is safe and a little bit better, like enjoying play for two results. I also noticed that recently this move played, probably there were some other games, but Levon Aronian played this move in 2022, chess, so once again, chess 24. Not sure about the tournament. Looks very risky, but I think it's probably well analyzed. And I checked, it's basically they played the top choice of engine. So White Kamer, Vincent Kamer, prodigy from Germany. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is this jumped a little bit. I want to get back to this line. A4 seems critical. There is no a6. Bishop a6, knight g5, knight d5 for those who are interested. Knight d4, bishop b4, knight c3. All these like pretty much engine top choices for both sides, and it's maybe slightly better for white, but probably holdable. The game ended in a draw here. After bishop c3, bc4, b4, very complicated. It requires very serious analysis here with engine and everything, but a very exciting line. I thought c3 is just must play it always, but there is b5. There is b5 as well. c3, b takes c3, castle. I know that bishop d7 is also not bad. not bad move like in general, but recently almost everyone plays castle. Knight b3. There have been a couple of games that Nakamura tried the move for the bishop b2, bishop d7, c4. I don't think it changes too much. It's still pretty much the same type of position. Black is very solid. Knight b3 is well known top choice. Bishop goes to e7. Knight fd4. After c4, here very important recent idea where it's appeared that after bishop b2, black actually can play rook f8, and that's much more useful to compare with rook fd8. Now after rook fd8, knight d4, there is still some pressure, slight pressure, typical Catalan pressure, thanks to the Catalan bishop. Meanwhile, rook fc8, it's basically knight d4 is not dangerous now. So, and what is important is that after bishop f6, definitely critical, bishop f6, winning 2 pieces for the rook, bishop f6, bishop a1, knight a1, rook d8. So this position appears to be very good for black. Very good for black. Even Nakamura got worse after knight d2, knight a5, knight b3, knight x c4. So his game against Prague, where he played rook c2 and was worse after this. Chess 24, I guess, once again, one of the tournaments. Now rook d4 is a better move, but then after capture, so there is another high-level game, Indian prodigy Grandmaster Geishi against Aronia. So the position is objectively equal, black won. Probably even, I would say, easier to play for black. Just pass pawn on the queen side, rook c8, and so on, right? So this is not working, and it seems like overall it easily solves the problems for black after rook f8. Now, white, a few games white tries c5, but bishop e8, like removing the bishop from potential attack, knight d2, b6. b6, getting rid of annoying c5 pawn, knight c4, rook b8. Equal. There are games, or almost all of them ended in draw here. So no problems in this direction. Now, knight d4 played by Timur Radjabov. By the way, I mentioned Fabiano. Timur Radjabov was my first customer at this highest level in 2000, when Timur considered to be a prodigy. So he was my first high-level grandmaster, elite grandmaster that I started my coaching career at this level, and always very good in opening preparation. But well, this game he didn't pose any problems to Jan. I think it's also I would like to mention that I guess Jan prepared a lot of opening ideas for World Championship match. It's usually you build huge amount of opening material and ideas and novelties, and then it takes you for a few years further. I know it's from working experience with Boris Gelfand. It's massive amount of work that you can somewhat relax a little bit for next 2-3 years. Yeah, so in this position, knight d4, Jan played bishop d7. I noticed that black is doing not so bad even after knight takes c4, cd4, knight d5, played by strong grandmaster Wesley So played this. Yeah, it's improves white pawn structure, bishop d2, then f5, it seems like a very important move, many games, and yeah, black just needs to develop queenside, b6, bishop d7, b6, bishop a6. Seems like also very close to equality. Now, this is less risk, definitely less risk in this position. Knight takes c6 was played. Now, knight b5, from what I understand, could be like a little bit more challenging, but black is doing, black should be alright. Bishop a3, knight a3 to play this position. Hard for me to believe there could be anything significant, especially at this level. Now, Timur captured on c6, bishop c6, bc6, white played bishop e3, knight d5, bishop d4, and of course Jan is very well prepared. He played c5. Now, there was some game where rook fd8 was played. There is no, like, definitely those pawns are a little bit problematic, as well as c5 square. So if white has if black has a chance to get rid of c6 pawn, it should be taken, right? So here, for instance, I thought there was a game, and could be an improvement. c4, knight b4, king g2. I feel like a little bit better for white, this kind of pressure. c5 is very, very, very good decision by Jan. Now, knight c5 was actually officially novelty. Again, doesn't seem like it's a preparation or something special because it's just drawish. Instead, there was a game where white played bishop e5, the game of my good friend Viktor Michalevsky against Mihail 2009. Now, he was able to win this game, but black has like a few good options. So, for instance, I personally like c4 in this position. Now, if what like where to go with the knight, so it's even black can take over. It seems to me that white already have to strike with move e4, and then it's just that equal after simple tactical idea, rook fb8, so it's just that equal. Impossible to win this position. So that was move bishop e5. Timur just captured on c5, and it's just simplified into absolutely drawish, equal drawish rook endgame. Knight c3, so knight is very strong on c3, bishop c3, so he eliminated, and rook c1. It was just important to play one precise move, rook i3, because rook c1, it's probably still drawish, but black is doomed to defend passively in this position. Now, no reason to do this. Rook a3, just one accurate move, keep the rook active. Rook c2, h5 is very nice. Rook d7, a6, and it was just easy draw here. I think something that I would be disappointed if I would play white, and in the situation Timur Radjabov current tournament standings with -1. He needs definitely to win, get back, and no reason to be unhappy for Jan. He drew convincingly without too much effort with black, so great result for him. And now maybe we will get to the game which was discussed mostly. I feel like this game got like 80-90% coverage, all the rest like 10%. The game between Firouzja and Nakamura. So that was very exciting opening idea from French Grandmaster. So we got this line, Queen c2, and Nimzo, I wouldn't say it's the most popular, but classical move. Queen c2, obviously the idea to recapture on c3. So there are many moves here, c5, d5. Now Hikaru went for castle, and this is his line. He has a lot of games in database where he played castle. Now a3 was choice of Firouzja. Now there is another big line here, e4. I would say that Nakamura has a lot of experience in this line, and this is just main line, main tabia here. This is the discussion at the highest level here, but it seems to me it's pretty much settled here. So still from time to time you see new ideas, but it's more like for the one game. So more or less the line goes here, c5, like that. cd4, knight d4, knight d7, bishop f4, queen h4, g3, queen h5, castle, and g5. Looks like shocking play, but it's well-known theoretical line. cd5, bishop c3. For this position only, I found 7 games of Nakamura. There are so many games here, but only Hikaru played 7 games in this position. Remarkable. Now, one of his recent games, like he had a lot of games against Wesley so it's black wins pawn, but white has some compensation, and overall it's pretty balanced position. That's why kind of like not surprising that instead of e4, a3 was played in this game by Firouzja. a3, bishop c3, queen c3, and now this latest trend absolutely like probably 95% at the highest level. Black plays d5 in this position. b6, old-fashioned main line. you can hardly find nowadays at the top level. So everyone prefers to go for d5. Very straightforward, critical challenging line. So the idea after bishop g5, d takes c4, queen c4, play b6. So the point here, black goes for very quick development. So bishop a6, and then the main idea to deliver c5 as quick as possible. Now rook d1 played by Alireza. Instead, another move is knight f3. I think it's even statistically maybe more games with knight f3, but again there is a feeling that in this position it's more or less settled. So almost every game goes for this line: bishop queen a4, h6, bishop h4, c5, capture rook d1, attacking the queen, queen b6, bishop f6, gf6. It appears that white cannot take advantage of vulnerable king and pawn structure on the king side, and it's usually comfortable draw for black here. So one of the recent game played in a tournament in Norway, Magnus tournament, Stavanger, was between Anish Giri and Wesley So, where it was very comfortable draw for Wesley So, rook d5, rook c1, rook b8, and so on. So it seems like this line, no problems, no serious ideas for white, and rook d1 was played by French grandmaster. Rook d1, bishop a6, queen a4. Now, this is the crossroad. I noticed Nakamura always plays h6 in this position. Another line, queen d7, queen c2, and then this endgame, queen c6, knight c6, bishop takes f6, gf6, knight f3, looks kind of slightly better for white. I'm pretty sure with precise play it's holdable, but understandably Hikaru didn't want to play this at this game, like just right away to defend passively. No reason to do this when you have a very good alternative, which is h6. h6, attacking the bishop, of course, like giving up the bishop is not an option, so bishop h4, the pin is somewhat annoying, queen e7. So once again, as I mentioned before, black major idea to deliver c5, knight f3, rook d8. So only for this position I found 6 games of Nakamura. 6 games of Nakamura. So we can easily predict that it was a very, very concrete preparation from Firouzja. So he opted for queen c2. Nakamura already faced like all different moves. He faced g4 against Mamedjarov. He faced like e3. That's basically kind of like shows the main idea, in my opinion, for black. Bishop takes f1, rook f1, c5, d takes c5, rook d1, queen d1, and great timing for g5, bishop g3, and even queen can take. So there's no reason to take bc5. And of course, one of the key points here, that king on e1. So we took on f1, white cannot castle. Check, king g7, bishop e5, very dangerous pin, but here comes perpetual. Here comes perpetual, rook is hanging on f1, and that is the point, right? I guess if king d2, we cannot take the rook, but we can play knight d7, I guess, first. And king will be dangerous under attack potentially. Now e4, I think it's Nakamura game against Lek Wang. He got worse position, so this is the only game I found where he got a little bit worse out of the opening. Once again, he knew where to play g5, so I can say that Hikaru already faced this idea that happened in our game. g5, knight g5, a g5, bishop g5. First move, he reacted very precise, e5, but then after rook d3, I think he committed inaccuracy, rook d4, and went for this position. And it's actually, I think it was better for white. So he escaped, but I don't think he was satisfied with the opening results. And it's very easy to improve. Just after rook d3, you have moved knight bd7 in this position, and it looks like black is fine. black is fine. It's I think it's computer gives that it should be draw with some repetition or so on. Yeah, so we checked d4, and now finally we get to the game where Firouzja played queen c2, c5, e4, bishop takes f1, rook takes f1, g5. So we are familiar with this idea. And of course, knight g5, it's a critical move. And also, to be honest, like if white enters this line, white has to play this. Before bishop g3 was the move in this position. But it's not a good one, played in the game, actually very fresh game, 2022, back against Johnson. After knight c6, dc5, black could have just played bc5, and there is a problem. So that's the whole strategy for black, that now king on e1 stuck. Black has very active play and better chances. Knight g5. It's interesting how much Nakamura knew here. Maybe he didn't know this move, this idea. I wouldn't be surprised because he's so busy with all the streams and so on now. But of course, it's also like the move queen c2, right? So we don't know, but it was clear that Firouzja was better prepared. So here we have a g5, bishop g5. Now there is this pin which looks deadly, but black has other defensive resources. So white, it's probably a guarantee that white will regain the piece, but there are some other things happening. So knight c6 was Hikaru's choice. Instead, from what I'm checking, even knight d7 is fine. It's very hard to analyze this position because engine shows that everywhere is 0-0. Everywhere is draw, but it's not like perpetual or something. So I'm pretty sure Alireza prepared a lot of tricks here. So knight d7 with the line like this. I thought it's quite logical. cd4, ef6, queen c5. And let's say queen c5, knight c5, and endgame is okay. It looks very complicated, very double-edged, but according to the computer, endgame is fine, even after recapturing with this pawn. After both. Now, let's get to the game. Knight c6 was played. Very interesting queen c1, definitely home preparation. No questions about this. After e5, there is a forced draw. Knight d4, let's say queen goes here, queen b7. Very, very nice move, idea to take this pawn. And now, actually, white has to play ridiculous move king d2 in order to escape here. After bishop d8, rook d8, actually the position of king on e1 and obviously the passivity of all white pieces should decide the game in black's favor. So king d2, remarkable computer suggestion. So this is how white escapes here. And then like probably no good discoveries, queen f3, and at some point it's perpetual. So absolutely unbelievable line. No, I'm pretty sure that Alireza knew about this line. So he played queen c1, very interesting. Rook d4. Computer gives that e5 is playable move. Playable move. Now the lines are super complicated, so I'm not surprised that it was hard to make this decision of the board for Hikaru. Like for instance, one of the lines runs like this: knight d4, rook d3, queen d6, rook h3. Looks extremely dangerous. Now there is this line: knight a4, bishop d8, rook d8, f3. So knight is under attack and cannot really move because queen g5 will come and it will be decisive. But black can sacrifice exchange. Check and king f2, queen f5. And it's somehow, again, as quite often happens in this line, there is some perpetual. But when you see this how computer plays these positions, it's amazing. Bishop h4, another interesting try. 3 in g5 square for the queen. Now also black holds here. Rook d6, queen g5, king h7, just kind of like perpetual here again. So rook d4 was played in the game. Rook d4 was played in the game. Here we have rook d4, knight d4, queen f4. it looks like knight c2 allowed white fighting position. Instead, it seems to me that knight f6, I'm sorry, queen d7, bishop f6, knight c2 leads to objective equality, even though the top line here extremely complicated. It goes king e2, queen b5, king d2, queen takes f1, so it's not mate, so that's the whole point. Queen g3, check on g7, king runs, queen g8, king d7. Well, obviously no time, queen a8, queen f2 we play, so queen f7, king c6, queen e6, king b5. So, like, you know, I would see this position, I probably would give up for black at this point, but according to computer, rook f8, and everything's okay for black. It's about equal. Yeah, well, impossible when you don't know, even for the best players in the world. Now, that's why it's understandable that Hikaru went for practical knight c2. He calculated this line, queen d7, king c2, queen a4, king b1, queen e4, so it's pretty forced. But what happened that at least this endgame is very playable, slightly better for white. I'm pretty sure should be holdable with precise play. Now, also there was this kind of like psychological pressure when Alireza had at this point 1 hour 50 minutes and Nakamura had 28 minutes left. And also, it feels to me he didn't defend really precisely, so there were some chances for white at some point. But I'm not even sure whether there was like a real chance to win the game. So that's already like definitely was covered in some, you know, analysis or some YouTube channels. I'm pretty sure about this. But it was, I would say, a very unpleasant scenario for Hikaru overall. But it's just amazing that he survived this game. It was a kind of like, I feel like, study-like escape for him, which with some kind of like fortress, somewhat a fortress. Of course, on this level, it's very hard to win the games. The defensive skills are simply remarkable. It's at this level to win this game. It's very, it's a big accomplishment, right? So even though it seems like it was a very favorable scenario for Alireza, but very probably the most interesting game of the fourth round with the novelty, which hard for me to say whether it will get popularity or it's just the novelty for one game, which also, you know, this is how it's played at the highest level. You find a new idea, you play this idea, and then you create practical problems that it's not easy to solve. Of course, then everyone can get to their engines and maybe find the solution, but off the board it is a different story. Now, interesting to see whether there will be more games here. I have the impression that it was more or less for one game idea, because as you noticed, I suggested a couple of ideas for black where black could have equalized with some perpetual. Maybe with the stronger computers there are some more playable ideas, so the future will show. Guys, so that's more or less my coverage for today. 4 games. I think 2 very interesting opening battles with like significant novelties, and 2 maybe more quiet, but of course there is a lot remains behind the curtains, like the preparation and so on. So good games, like probably very satisfied both Jan and Duda, how their games were played with black pieces, comfortable draws, and but also I think even more happy Richard and Hikaru saving difficult positions. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my coverage.